The Sparrow and the Silver Thread Part 1. The Quiet Girl and the Sparrow. Welcome, dear friends, to English Story Haven, where every tale carries a spark of magic and a lesson for the heart. Tonight, I will tell you a story you've never heard before. The story of a quiet girl, a small sparrow, and a silver thread that could change a whole village. Long ago, beside a winding river, there stood a small village known for its silk weavers. From morning until the stars appeared, the sound of wooden looms filled the air. The people wove threads into beautiful cloth that shimmered like water under the sun. But in that busy village lived a girl who was often overlooked. Her name was Mira. She had soft brown eyes and a voice as gentle as a lullaby. She worked hard, carrying water, gathering mulberry leaves, and helping at the looms. But she was not known for bold words or grand deeds. When she spoke, people often spoke over her, as though her thoughts were too quiet to matter. Yet there was something about Mira that set her apart, a heart that always noticed when others were in need. She shared food with the hungry, mended torn clothes for the children, and stayed behind to help the elders finish their weaving, though no one asked her to. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the river gold, Mira went to fetch water. Her wooden jars clinked softly against one another as she walked down the narrow path. She hummed to herself, a tune no one else knew, a song of comfort she often whispered when the days felt long dotted to the river's edge. Her eyes caught a strange sight. There, tangled in a knot of abandoned silk threads, was a small sparrow. Its wings beat desperately, its tiny body trembling as it tried to escape. Mira gasped and set her jars aside. "Oh, you poor thing," she whispered. With careful fingers, she untangled the threads, loosening the knots until the little bird was free. She expected it to fly away at once, but instead, it perched lightly on her open palm. Then something wondrous happened. The sparrow tilted its head, and in a voice soft but clear, it spoke. "Kind hands weave stronger than any loom. You have freed me, Mira, and so I give you this from its beak." The bird dropped a single, shimmering silver thread into her hand. It gleamed in the fading sunlight, finer than any silk she had ever seen. Glowing with a light of its own, Mira stared, her heart thudding. How can this be?" she whispered, but the sparrow only fluttered its wings and said, "Guard it well. It will guide you when the river grows silent." Before she could ask what it meant, the sparrow lifted into the sky, disappearing. Beyond the clouds, Mira stood by the riverbank, the silver thread glimmering between her fingers. Her breath came quick, for she felt a strange weight in her chest, feeling that this small gift was no ordinary thing. She tucked the thread carefully into her shawl and carried her jars home in silence. That night, as she lay in her bed, the air shifted. The wind whistled sharply through the shutters, and outside, the river's song, once steady and strong, began to falter, as though its voice was growing weak. Mira sat up, listening. A chill touched her heart. Something was changing, and so the story begins. To be continued in Part 2. Part 2, the river's warning. Previously in English Story Haven, we met Mira, a quiet girl from a riverside weaving village. She rescued a sparrow trapped in silk threads, and to her wonder, the bird spoke to her. As thanks, it gifted her a shimmering silver thread, saying it would guide her when the river grows silent. That night, Mira heard the river's song weaken, as though its voice was fading away. Morning broke with a heavy sky. Clouds rolled low over the village, casting shadows across the mulberry fields. Mira carried her jars to the river once more, but when she reached the banks, her heart clenched. The river, usually rushing strong and bright, had slowed to a sluggish trickle. Its surface was dull, no longer sparkling in the sunlight. The water wheels that powered the looms turned lazily, groaning as though too tired to work. Without the river, the silk threads would not spin, and without silk, the village could not survive. Whispers filled the air as the villagers gathered by the shore. "The river is dying," said one woman, wringing her hands. "How will we weave without water?" cried another. Children tugged at their mothers' skirts, asking why. The river no longer sang. Fear spread quickly. Some spoke of curses, others of angry spirits. The village chief, a stern man with a sharp voice, raised his arms for silence. "We must ration the water," he declared. "No wasting it, no sharing. Everyone must guard their own jars. We will survive if we are careful." But the villagers did not become careful, they became greedy. Families fought over who filled their jars first. Neighbors who once shared food now turned their backs. At night, doors were bolted, and eyes peered suspiciously through cracks. Mira watched all of this with sorrow. She remembered the sparrow's words, It will guide you when the river grows silent. That evening, as she lay down to rest, she clutched the silver thread in her hand. Its glow was faint but steady, like a star in her palm. Her eyes drifted shut, and suddenly, she was no longer in her small room. She stood by the river, but it was dry and cracked, the stones glittering like bones in the moonlight. From the shadows came the flutter of wings. The sparrow appeared, its eyes bright as coals. "Mira," it said, its voice echoing like wind over water. "The river spirit is fading. The greed and fear of the people drain its strength. Only kindness can restore its flow. You must weave with the silver thread, but not on any loom of man. You must weave with deeds of the heart." Mira trembled. "But I'm only one girl. No one listens to me. How can I save the river?" The sparrow hopped closer, tilting its head. "Even the quietest hand can mend what is torn. Begin, and the thread will show you the way." With that, the dream dissolved, and Mira awoke with a gasp. The silver thread in her hand pulsed once, like a heartbeat. The next day, Mira hurried to the chief and tried to tell him of her dream. "Please listen," she begged. "The river is weak because we have turned against each other. We must share. We must be kind." But the chief laughed, and others shook their heads. "Childish nonsense," one muttered. "She dreams like a fool," said another. "Kindness cannot fill a jar," the chief declared. "Go back to your work." Mira's cheeks burned, but she did not argue. She clutched the silver thread close, her heart heavy but determined. If no one else believed, then she would believe. That night, she stood again by the fading river, the silver thread gleaming faintly in her hand. She whispered into the darkness, "If I must begin alone, then alone I will begin." And from the trees came a soft flutter of wings. To be continued in Part 3. Part 3, The Hidden Loom, previously in English Story Haven. The river began to fade, and fear spread through the village. Neighbors turned against one another, hoarding water and food. Mira dreamed of the sparrow once more, who told her the river spirit was dying, and only kindness could restore its flow. She tried to warn the villagers, but they laughed at her. Alone and determined, Mira promised she would begin. The next morning, Mira followed the sparrow's call. Its wings glimmered in the sunlight as it darted ahead, leading her away from the village. She carried the silver thread in her hand, its faint glow guiding her steps through tangled woods and across mossy stones. She walked until she reached a grove she had never seen before. At its center stood a loom of ancient wood, half hidden by vines. It was larger than any loom in the village, carved with flowing patterns that seemed to ripple like water. Though weathered with age, it pulsed faintly, as if waiting for a touch to wake it. Mira stepped closer, her heart pounding. She held up the silver thread, and as she did, the loom gave a soft hum, like a harp string plucked in the wind. The sparrow fluttered onto her shoulder. "This is the river's loom," it whispered. "Here you must weave. But know this, each line of the silver thread grows only when your heart chooses kindness. Deeds, not words, will give it length." Mira frowned, puzzled. "Deeds?" The sparrow tilted its head. "Help others, even when no one sees. Give, even when you have little. Each act of kindness will strengthen the thread." Mira touched the loom. It felt warm beneath her fingers. She tied the end of the silver thread to its frame and saw that the thread barely reached across the first line. She would need more, much more. That day, Mira began. She found an old woman who had no firewood left for the cold nights. Though Mira's own arms ached, she carried logs to her house. When she returned to the loom that evening, the silver thread had grown longer, glowing faintly like moonlight. The next morning, she gave her portion of rice to a hungry child who had gone without supper. Again, the thread lengthened, shining brighter than before. And so it continued, every act of kindness mending a torn cloak, carrying water for a neighbor too weak to walk, comforting a crying child added to the thread. Slowly, she began to weave. The silver shimmer grew across the loom in delicate lines, forming patterns like ripples on a river's surface. But not all eyes were blind. One villager, a man named Garen, had grown suspicious. He noticed Mira slipping into the forest each night, her shawl glowing faintly from the thread hidden within. His heart, darkened by greed and fear, began to whisper, "If the girl holds a magic thread, it must be mine. With it, I could weave riches beyond measure. Why should she acquire it? Nobody holds such power." He followed her one evening, hiding among the trees. He watched her feed a hungry child, then vanish into the forest. His eyes narrowed as he caught the glimmer of the silver loom. His fists tightened with envy. Mira, unaware, continued her work. The cloth on the loom grew inch by inch, shimmering brighter with every kind deed. Though weary from the long days, her heart felt lighter. She truly believed that the river could yet be saved. But in the shadows, Garen's plan was already taking shape, and as the cloth shone brighter, so too did the darkness of his greed grow stronger, to be continued in Part 4. Part 4: Greed and Darkness. Previously in English Story Haven. Mira discovered a hidden forest loom, guided by the Sparrow. The silver thread grew longer each time she performed an act of kindness, feeding the hungry, helping the weak, comforting the lonely. Slowly, she wove a shining cloth upon the ancient loom. But not everyone's eyes looked kindly upon her. A villager named Garen, driven by greed, followed Mira in secret, plotting to steal the thread for himself. One moonless night, when the village lay silent under a blanket of cold, Garen crept through the forest. Mira had already left, her soft lantern light fading into the distance. He moved like a shadow, careful not to snap a twig underfoot. Last, he found it, the loom. Its silver cloth shimmered faintly, casting ripples of light across the grove. Garen's eyes widened, his breath quick and shallow. Never had he seen anything so beautiful. Riches, power, respect, all of it could be his. His hand darted forward. He tugged at the cloth, yanking free a length of silver thread. But the moment he touched it, a sharp wind roared through the grove. The loom trembled, the thread twisting like a snake in his hands. Garen cried out, but it was too late. The stolen thread unraveled into dust, scattering in the wind. The light faded from his grasp, leaving nothing but empty fingers. The Sparrow swooped down, its voice ringing clear. Greed cannot weave what kindness has spun. But Garen did not listen. His envy burned hotter. If I cannot take it by hand, then I will break it by force, he growled. He fled into the night, his heart boiling with anger. Meanwhile, the village grew darker. The river shrank to a thin stream. The water wheel stilled. Fear turned into anger. Villagers began to whisper of curses and evil spirits. And when they noticed the Sparrow fluttering often near Mira, suspicion took root. It must be the bird. One man said, "Yes, it follows her." Another agreed, "Perhaps it has bewitched her, and through her, the village suffers." By the time the sun set, a group had gathered at Mira's door. They seized the Sparrow when it perched nearby, trapping it in a wicker cage. Its wings beat desperately against the bars, its voice muffled. Mira rushed forward. "Stop. The Sparrow is no curse, it has only brought me hope." But the chief shook his head. "Hope will not fill our jars. If this bird is the cause, we must cast it into the river." "No," Mira cried, but they would not listen. That night, while the villagers argued over what to do with the Sparrow, Mira slipped into the shadows. Her heart pounded as she reached the cage. The little bird looked up at her, its bright eyes dim with weariness. "Hush, little one," she whispered, her hands trembling as she lifted the latch. No kindness can let another suffer in chains. The cage creaked open, and the Sparrow burst free, its wings flashing in the moonlight. It circled once above her head, then landed gently on her shoulder. Its voice, though weak, whispered, "You have chosen rightly." The final weave awaits. At that moment, Mira knew the truth. If she did not finish the silver cloth soon, the river would die and the village with it. But even as hope flickered in her heart, she sensed eyes watching from the darkness. Garen stood among the trees, his face twisted with fury. "You think kindness will save us?" he spat. "No, girl, power saves. And if I cannot take yours, then I will see it destroyed." The wind howled through the forest, the loom silver cloth shimmering like a fragile moonbeam. Mira clutched the Sparrow close, her courage steady despite her fear. The greatest trial was yet to come, to be continued in Part 5. Part 5: The Final Weave. Previously on English Story Haven. Mira freed the Sparrow from the villager's cage. Guided once more by the bird, she hurried to the hidden forest loom. But in the shadows, Garen, driven by greed, plotted to destroy everything she had woven. Mira reached the loom at dawn. The silver thread shimmered in her hands, brighter than ever before. With the Sparrow at her side, she began to weave with all her heart. She thought of every kind act she had given, food shared with the hungry, words of comfort to the lonely, gentle hands that lifted burdens. Each memory glowed within the thread, making the cloth shine like a rising sun. The Sparrow's voice whispered, "Finish it, Mira. The river waits." Just as the last rows were being woven, Garen leapt from the trees. His eyes burned with envy. "This cloth is mine," he shouted, tearing at the silver fabric. The loom shuddered. For a moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then the cloth released a brilliant light, wrapping around Garen. He cried out as the light dissolved him into nothing but a faint shadow carried away by the wind. Mira, trembling, continued weaving until the final thread was tied. Suddenly, the cloth dissolved into mist, a silver fork that drifted gently toward the river. It sank into the waters, and at once the river roared back to life, fuller and clearer than ever before. Fish leapt high, the fields drank deeply, and the village was saved. The villagers rushed to Mira, shame heavy in their eyes. "We doubted you. We doubted kindness itself." "Forgive us," Mira only smiled softly. "The river forgives, and so do I." The sparrow perched on her shoulder one final time. "You have woven more than thread, Mira. You have woven a truth the world must never forget." With a flutter of wings, it soared into the sky, vanishing into the clouds. From that day on, Mira was no longer the quiet, overlooked girl. She became the heart of her village, the weaver of hope, the guardian of kindness, the one who saved the river with nothing but a gentle spirit. Lesson for viewers: true strength does not come from power or wealth, it comes from kindness. Just as Mira's silver thread was spun from compassion, our actions of goodness can weave a brighter world. Remember, even the smallest act of kindness can grow into something that saves us all.